Hello my friends and welcome to the very first of the Divide and Conquer version 5 faction overview videos that will be on my channel. Starting off with the Anduin Vale, I have decided that these will be conducted in alphabetical order. So we will go into the Anduin Vale, next week will be Angmar, so on and so forth until we get to the Woodland Realm. Now, before we get too far into the video, I do want to let you guys know, in the description there is a link below that is to a GoFundMe. This spring break I will be going to do volunteer work over at a children's home in Ladyville, Belize. So if you want to help me cover the travel expenses for that, you can go ahead and click on that down below. You don't have to, and if for any reason it manages to actually exceed my total goal, then any further proceeds will be donated to the children's home there, but I've also linked them in the GoFundMe if you just want to go donate to them directly instead. Anyway, starting with the Vale of Anduin, one of the Wildmen factions, the three Wildmen factions in Divide and Conquer, and the one that got, well, they all actually got pretty significant changes. If I had to guess, I'd say Anduin or Dunland. Probably Dunland got the biggest overhaul. But here we are with the Anduin. As you can see, we have Framsburg in the north, Nethelberg, Bjornshalls, Fenholm, Duinberg, Leodholt, and Rosgabel. I do not believe any of these settlements are different. I believe, yeah, everything is the same in terms of start location as version 4.5. The same regions, however, the Anduin plays completely differently. Looking at the generals, we have, of course, Lord Bjorn right here in Bjornshalls. Grimbjorn is over in Mathelberg. You also have Fastred, Golkred, Gleowine, Athanagild, and Magor. So each of your starting cities, you have a governor or a general already involved, plus Admiral Geord. I don't know if the name is random each time. It might always be Admiral Geord, but this just gives you access to cross the river at any time from anywhere as long as you have the one ship. But it is the only ship that you will be able to get on this entire river. So in terms of campaign, it is arguably one of the more difficult factions in Divide and Conquer, depending on how you play it. Because to the north you have Gundabad, to the west you will have the Goblins of Moria. They don't start with Goblin Town, but they get it in the turn 1 auto expansion. And to the south you have Dol Guldur, so your entire north and west is surrounded by enemies, and your south is also covered by enemies. You do have a little bit of respite in that to the northeast you have the Woodland Realm. You don't need to worry about any foes from that direction. And to the southwest you have Khazad Doom and Karis Galadhan over here in the Golden Wood. But aside from that, it is a difficult campaign in the fact that your military is kind of stretched thin unless you decide to pull all of your forces together and take out one of your enemies, which is typically recommended. Personally, I recommend dealing with the goblins first, clearing out the path, because it's just one settlement. Once you take out Goblin Town, then you don't have to worry about any goblins on your western side, and then you simply have the north and the south down below. Another thing you could do is you could take all of your generals and your starting units, recruit some more, and come down here, cleanse the Dark Hill of Dol Guldur, and then from there you won't have to deal with repeat Nazgul, because if you kill the Nazgul, they do respawn in about 10 turns, I believe. It might be 15, actually, off the top of my head. I can't quite recall. But that is the recommended. If you want an easier campaign, rush one of the factions. If you don't, you may find yourself getting overwhelmed. So before going too much more into strategy, we will take a look at the Anduin's construction. Now the Anduin is limited to only the large town up until you complete their script, which would be the mountain passes, but we'll get more onto that later on. Of course, they have pretty much the standard construction that most other factions have. They are limited to a tier 3 blacksmith, so that is the highest level of armor you can reach. Forts are all the same, all the other buildings, typical of what you can expect around Wildman nations. However, the Anduin does have a very special unique building, just like Dunland and Anandwythe, and that is the apiary. So this will give you trade, building income, culture, and population anywhere that you find an apiary, which if I look on the map is that little resource icon right there. So before version 5, these used to be pretty rare. I think it was Bjorn's Halls with Thalberg. I don't think there was one in Framsburg. There might have been one in Duenberg and Fenholm, Rosgabel, maybe even Erui also. There probably is one somewhere in this region. But there has been a honey resource expansion, so now one has been added to Framsburg. We'll find a couple odd ones over in Robanian, also going down into Rohan, and some of the woodland settlements here also have apiaries. So you can now get your special resource building just a bit more available, helps you with your economy, because, I mean, for Eotheod, fish are pretty much anywhere. Like, there's fish resources along the Anduin River, the Anduin, of course, all the way over in the ocean over here. So the Eotheod could get their fisheries anywhere, and for Dunland, it would be the tanneries. You could find a tannery virtually anywhere with hides, which is a good chunk of the map if you consider it. But honestly, it's one of the best buildings for the Anduin, if only for the straight income and the population growth bonus. It's a very, very nice building to have, and that can also be upgraded to a apiary homestead, which basically just doubles everything it does except for the population growth, but definitely worth it to invest in those. I highly recommend doing that for your economy. But other than that, pretty much standard Northmen building change. It's never a bad idea to go for a Mason's Hall to make everything else cheaper. Now, to get into the real specialties of their scripts before going into the military, and that is the mountain passes. So, in order to unlock large cities and strongholds, you must construct mountain watchtowers and the equivalent upgraded versions in your western settlement. So those are allowable in Framsburg, Mathaelberg, Fenholm. I believe you can also get them in Goblin Town, if I'm not mistaken, Erui, and I don't think you can get them on the eastern side. There might be in Rakiaberg, I don't think there is. And I know for a fact Uralstone up here. I'll toggle the Fog of War so we can see the whole map. I know Uralstone can get it. I'm not certain about Mount Gundabad, but pretty much anything on the western side of the Anduin River, you are able to construct the towers. So the way that works is you need 100 points, and going to the watchtowers, where are they? Mountain defenses. The watchtowers will give you 5 points, the mountain outposts will give you 10, and the mountain keep will give you another 10. So if you build the full line, you will get 25 points. So if you do the full line in, say, Framsburg, Uralstone, Mathaelberg, and Fenholm, then you will unlock large cities. But if you also mix and match these, like in Goblin Town, and I'm pretty sure you can get them in Erui, could be wrong about that one. You don't have to like fully upgrade them, but if you do want the cities, all you need to do is build those, and they are worth your time. They do take a little while to build. It's highly recommended to get Mason's Halls up so that you can reduce that building time as well as the cost. But you can see, if we look at it again, each tier increases the income that you get and the tradable goods bonus. Plus, if you get to the mountain keep, you get a population growth bonus, which will of course help out with your taxes. So, and one thing I do want to point out here, although the passes can now be crossed by companies of both merchants and other travelers, it is not without heavy tolls. However, in the books, it is said by Glowman, if it were not for the Beornings, the passage from Dale to Rivendell would long ago have become impossible. They are valiant men and keep open the High Pass and the Ford of Carrock, but their tolls are high, he added with a shake of his head, which implies that it's not necessarily monetary tolls, but rather the tolls on the Beornings and the Woodsmen that reside here instead, as in they suffer and they take losses fighting goblins and wolves up in the mountains. However, that has been adapted. You will lose soldiers fighting the goblins and Gundabad, but you do actually get some monetary tolls as well, so kind of both sides of the word there. I thought that was interesting. So anyway, going on into the construction, or I should say the military construction, the Anduin has a 3-forked barracks system where you can only pick one path per settlement. Every single settlement can get the muster ground, which will give you 1 slot, the law bonus, and your militias. In Fenholm, you'll actually get the stores as well, so kind of good to have that there for the store sheriffs. But beyond that, you are then kind of limited to what you pick. So the first tier would be the Beorning camp, the Woodman camp, and the Eotheod camp. Those only require the muster ground and the tier 1 town hall. So from any of those, you'll be able to get Beorning axemen and Beorning spearmen. The Woodman camp gives you Woodman warriors and Woodman hunters, and the Eotheod camp will give you Eotheod horsemen. To get to the next tier, all it takes is the Lord's Hall, which is the tier 3 town hall, and the tier 3 blacksmith. And from the Beorning Barracks, that unlocks you the Beorning shield bearers, defenders, and the mighty bear warriors. For the Woodman range, that will give you the Woodman wardens, the trackers, and the Greenwood foresters. And the stables, probably arguably the best one, Eotheod cavalry, archers, and the mighty Fram's guard. So it does take some planning. You do need to consider what are you going to build and what are you going to train at each of your settlements. When you start the campaign, Bjorn's Halls has the Beorning camp pre-made, Duenberg has the Woodman camp pre-made, and Framsburg has the Eotheod camp. Kind of about where the people were. Framsburg was the capital of the Eotheod, who did move over to the Anduin Vale in the year Third Age, 1856, after the great Battle of the Plains, where the Wayne Riders actually won, but they were so diminished in military might that they weren't able to venture any farther and harm Gondor. The man who led the Eotheod to the Anduin Vale was Marwini. Some of the men went to merge with the people of Dale, but he led his people up to the Gladden Fields, which is right around here by the Gladden River, so kind of this area where Duenberg is. They settled on the eastern side when they first started, and then it kind of grew from there. The Beornings, I believe, were already living in this region, and the Woodmen are just the mixed descendants of whatever men live in these forests. So that leaves Maythelberg, Fenholm, Rosgabel, and Leodholt as open to whatever building you want to go with. I have some personal recommendations. I would say you definitely want some cavalry in the south. Probably not a bad idea to get that at either Rosgabel or at Leodholt. I'd probably do it at Rosgabel. And then in the north, it does not hurt to have some archers up against, well, pretty much the very lightly armored orcs at Gundabad, so I might go with a Woodman camp at Maythelberg, and from there you can kind of go with whatever you want. But do note, try to plan what units you're going to have. The Beornings are typically your infantry, the Woodmen are typically your skirmishers, and of course the Eotheod are your cavalry. But if you want a easier campaign on yourself, I highly recommend getting the cavalry in the south. Aside from that, that's basically it for the campaign part of the Vale of Anduin. Your leaders are very powerful in terms of unique bodyguards. Lord Bjorn actually isn't unique, but he does have the mighty skin changers, along with Grimbjorn also has those bodyguards, and because they're your faction leader and your faction heir, they will have more than the standard bodyguard size. I believe with Bjorn, you can get to almost 60 skin changers, and that's before you even have any ancillaries or traits that add to their personal security. So their personal warband of skin changers is very powerful. To the north, Glaerwine has now become a Eotheod archer unit, so he is no longer the shock cavalry unit that was the Eotheod lancers in version 4.5/4.6, but being a horse archer general, and I believe one of the only remaining horse archer generals. If I'm not mistaken, it is only Glaerwine of the Anduin, and then, Drangu the Bloody of Angmar, who is the warg horse archer guy. And aside from that, I think it's literally just Avalyn who you get with if you play as Dorwinion. Rohan might have one, but I'm pretty sure these are the only remaining cavalry archer bodyguards that are left in the game. There might be one for the elves. There probably is one from the elves that I just can't remember at the moment. Other bodyguards, Fastered does come with a unit of Greenwood foresters, so good archer there, and they do have spears. Eotheod just has standard Beorning, same as Magor. And you also have Volkred, who's arguably probably your weakest, but he is a hobbit, store sheriff, so not a great bodyguard. He's definitely meant just to sit in a settlement and help you get lots of money. I mean, he gives 400 gold to Fenholm, so have that man be your governor. Other uniqueness is that Radagast the Brown is your diplomat. There has been internal debate about him becoming a general himself, but he will be staying as a diplomat. He will not be becoming a general at this point in Divide and Conquer, and probably not for the foreseeable future. But if you want to make your own submod where you have Radagast be a general, then by all means, feel free to post that and ask for permission to put that on the submods channel. And personally, I would actually kind of like that, but I'm also okay with his implementation here. He isn't too special of a wizard, though. I admittedly do like his character in the movies. Aside from that, other uniqueness, if you do take Dol Guldur, you can unlock the Sylvan March Wardens, which would be your best archer unit. They are elven archers, actually, but kind of a nice reward for taking Dol Guldur. And that's pretty much it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'm pretty sure that's it. Oh, we can talk about the guilds they have. So you do get the Archers Guild, which will allow you to also get Sylvan March Wardens if you get the Elder Hunters Guild. Just remember that there can only be one Tier 3 guild in the entire map during a campaign, so if you were to get this, then there will be no other place where there would be an Elder Hunters Guild or Archers Guild, but it's probably going to be very difficult to get this one. And for the Horse Breeders Guild, you do get the Master Horse Breeders Guild, so not the global one, the headquarters, but that does allow you to train Eotheod archers, and of course, both guilds do allow for faster replenishment of their respective units. So the Archers Guild will allow you to train archers quicker, and of course the Horse Breeders Guild will allow you to get horses quicker. And most likely you'll end up with a Horse Breeders Guild in Framsburg, because you'll only be training cavalry up here, and the Valesmen and Vale Archers. And you might likely get the Archers Guild here in Duenberg, because you have the Vale Archers, Woodman Hunters, and all of the other Woodmen units. So other general advice I can give for playing the Vale of Anduin, I personally like to take Goblin Town. It makes a lot of money, and your entire western border is very safe. I then also like to take an army up to the north to deal with Gundabad, because though it's not shown here on turn 1, Gundabad does get pretty much a full banner army after turn 1, and that can be very scary. You often see it already over here on your border at turn 2, so it is wise to recruit plenty of Vale Archers, and maybe even be able to send, I'd probably send Lord Bjorn up north first to deal with that army. I've honestly found in version 5 that Dol Guldur isn't too threatening. Your regular skin changer generals that you already have down here, Magor and Eotheod, are typically plenty enough to deal with anything heavy like Chieftain Lagarin and his bodyguard. Ideally, you can also send out Fast Dread to help shoot down any wargs that they may bring, but I find that Gundabad is your primary threat. They are very powerful. They pretty much match you, if not outmatch your infantry, even the Beornings in melee due to their sheer power, but they are weak to archers, so it is a very good idea to get lots of Vale Archers to fight off Gundabad. Do be warned about rushing Gundabad. While you can take Uralstone and Dane's Halls, pretty much taking anything after that will trigger their Last Stand army, which does contain very powerful units, including Snow Trolls and Pale Uruks. So I don't completely advise rushing Gundabad until you have pretty much a full army that can go up there, and that wouldn't be like an early game full army where you just pull up all of your units. That would mean that you have tier 3 barracks, you have some heavy hitting units, you have cavalry, you have good archers. Heck, you might even want to have a catapult to deal with like Pale Uruks and try to get a lucky shot on them. Their Last Stand army is no joke. I'm pretty sure the Dol Guldur Last Stand army is much easier to fight. I'm pretty sure it's, it's got Mirkwood Uruks, probably the odd unit of trolls or two. But aside from that, it's just going to be like Mirkwood goblins and other weak stuff. So I find Gundabad to be a lot more threatening. Once you deal with one of your enemies and you take Goblin Town, either the north or south, the campaign does become much easier, but it can be quite an onslaught due to how much that Dol Guldur will send your way, and that Gundabad will have strong warriors in the north. And lastly, before we go on to the battle map, I do want to say I don't really recommend investing money into Leopold unless you have just a lot of surplus income. It's not really a profitable settlement. There's not really any trade resources in this region. In fact, there might not be a single tradable resource in this region. Okay, there's a unit of trappers here hiding in the trees, but I think that's pretty much it. It's a very barren region, makes not a whole lot of money. Eotheod actually ends up making you a little more money, and it wouldn't be a bad call to actually push into Eotheod. So do note on the turn 2 auto expansion, Thorguldur will have Aaron Ruinen. But if you do find time to expand into the woods, it's not going to make you a lot of money, but it will protect you from goblin spam in your east. So do be wary, there are plenty of hidden goblin and shadow rangers lurking. I'm pretty sure one of the shadow rangers is like right over here. You'll probably walk into him. Maybe not. It's somewhere in this region. There is a shadow ranger lurking in these trees, so just be careful where you're walking. I think I maybe went through the right path, but somewhere in these forests there is a, some ambushing rebels that you might want to keep your eyes out for. Outside of that, though, if you are able to deal with Dol Guldur and deal with the north, you're pretty much home free. It's a good idea to expand eastwards into Rovanion, as there are the odd apiaries. I believe, yep, there's one right here in Rawburg. I think there's also one, yep, Bursouthis has one. I don't think Logarth has one. I'm not seeing one on the map here, but they're kind of scattered, I think, even if you go farther east. So it's a good idea to go into Rovanion, and you'll probably end up pushing into Mordor most likely, or if you keep going north, into Angmar. If you decide to play true neutral or complete total war, then you do have Imladris and the lands of Eriador to your west, and the elves to your south, and the Rohirrim. So do note, I don't believe you can get any Rohirrim units, even as mercenaries. You actually might be able to get the standard Rohirrim mercenary cavalry unit, but that would be it down there. There are no other specialties if you go into Rohan, other than the fact that there's also the odd apiary here too. Like, there's been one added in Edoras, and the only reason I remember this is because I was the person that added the apiaries to more regions in the game. So anyway, we will go on to the battle map, and I will see you guys over there. And welcome to the battlefield. So here I've labeled out the entirety of Anduin's roster. So in our first ranks here, we have pretty much the units that you can get, well, arguably anywhere, and the General's Bodyguard, so the muster ground tier. We're going to split it up by the Beorning Barracks, the Woodsman Barracks, and the Eotheod Barracks. I felt like that kind of made the most sense. So starting with the Militia, the very basic units you'll be able to conscript almost anywhere. The Veilsmen, pretty much just your standard 2-attack, 6-attack spearmen. You're going to see a lot of these in the mod. Kind of just the basic stat line for any human-type militia spear unit. Some of the orcs even share these stats, though typically the orcs are a little worse with like maybe 1-attack or 2-attack and maybe 4 defense. But for the most part, any basic human spear militia, 200 soldiers, give or take, 2-attack. These guys actually have a 4-charge bonus, but terrible morale. They're not going to hold the line for long, but they're cheap, they're plentiful, and they actually have a bit of a movement speed bonus at 105% there, so they're a little bit faster than other units. Of course, being spears, good against camels, wargs, horses, anything that's mounted. They're nice to grab. They can hold for a short period of time, especially if you get some armor upgrades. These guys can get to like 9 defense. It's still not amazing, but they're at least abundant. But going on to the what I think is the real meat of the militia tier is the Veil Archers. Now, only 1 melee, only 2 defense, with one of that being armor. However, they do have a 3 missile attack, which for an early game archer, like militia tier archer, is actually respectable. Though keep in mind they have low accuracy, 150 meter range, and only 20 arrows. They don't hold that many. But in high numbers, you do get 177 of them. If you have just sheer numbers of volume of missiles, you're going to take out some enemies. These guys are especially great against Gundabad. They definitely trade upwards against like Snowwork Raiders. They do okay against Snowwork Scouts, so of course the Scouts are a significant tier, above the Veil Archers. But the raiders, the spears, even the light cavalry, the Veil archers do very, very good work. One of my favorite militia units, just because they have, that higher missile attack. But don't let cavalry engage with them. Even using these guys in melee, they can be used to kind of like rear charge a nearly routing unit, but they'll take casualties and they're not too strong in melee. And then going into our regional militia unit available at the muster ground, they're only at Fenholm, or the store sheriffs. Now, the great thing about hobbits, just like the Brayland ones, I mean, one missile attack doesn't seem like a lot, but they are effective against armor, so take in a unit whose armor stat may be, let's say it's the Iron Guard, and I think they have like 16 armor. Well, now their armor is only 8 if a stone is being thrown at them, for the sake of the damage roll-off that these do. So, quite strong. You can even take out, Sauron's bodyguard with enough hobbits and stones. They are quite potent, and they also have 50 missiles, so I don't think there is ever a situation where you will actually get off all of their stones, as that's to basically represent them just picking them up off the ground. They actually have okay morale. Yeah, their hobbits, it's actually pretty poor, but good stamina. The fact that they can, they're effective against armor is nice, but they are significantly worse than the Greyland version because their melee attack is only 2, and they have daggers equipped. The Shire Sheriffs are much better because they have, I believe, armor-piercing polearms, better defense. But they're just a nice kind of niche unit you can throw in to help support your line. They can do okay against things like Castellans. I throw them against Pale Urks, even against Trolls. They're very accurate with these stones. Even though it's just average, they throw them pretty straight and true. So against Trolls, they can be useful. If they get a volley off, they'll do some damage. And they have a relatively high rate of fire, so they'll get off their missiles quite quickly. Then going into the Skin Changers, arguably probably the best infantry bodyguard in the game. It's hard to think of anything else besides unique bodyguards, like obviously Gil-galad's company are amazing. But it's hard to think of any other generic general's bodyguard that's as good as the Skin Changers. Small unit size, only 33. But the fact that they actually have 2 hit points, 17 armor, 6 armor is solid. I should say 17 total defense. They're mostly defense skill. Archers are strong against them, javelins, crossbows. But the 2 hit points keeps them going. The real part where they shine is that they have 24 attack, which is effective against armor and effective against mounts. They frighten nearby enemy infantry, and when they charge in, they have a tendency to knock up the enemy, so the enemy will just get thrown up into the air on the charge, in which case, during that time, even though they're thrown into the air and then they fall over and have to get back up, the enemy is able to be hit. So they'll typically charge into a unit, throw them flying, and while the enemy is still on the ground, they'll start just cutting them apart. It is very brutal what these guys can do. 8 charge, and they are relentless, so they cannot be staggered. But do be warned, high melee attack units like Snowwork Raiders can drag the Skin Changers down if they are unsupported, because they do have a tendency to overcharge into an enemy formation, in which case if you don't quickly mop up that enemy, they can get attacked from all sides. The fact that they are relentless means that they won't cease their attack, and if they can get into like a kill animation, they are basically invincible until they finish the kill animation, but they're still vulnerable to being attacked at all sides because of that. Use them in the front line, use them to flank. Really, these guys will shine anywhere. Just don't let them get shot up by a bunch of arrows. As long as you can cover the arrow weakness, they will do very well, especially against Trolls. These guys, one of the few infantry units in the game that can actually go toe-to-toe with Trolls, and typically they'll win those fights. Some other elite halberds are capable of doing that over time, but Skin Changers, very good, but just don't let them get charged by a troll, and they'll do just okay. That'll do it for the basic tier. I'm going to go kind of left to right here, so we're going to go through the Beornings next. I have them laid out over here. First of all, the classic Beorning Axemen going all the way back to Vanilla 3rd Age. Of course, with a facelift, they look a bit better than they used to. Pretty much all of them use the 2-handed axes, and they have these kind of spikes on them, so they're kind of a mix of a axe and club. I always thought that was kind of nice. Pretty much the same stats as they've always been. 7 attack, 6 charge, 7 total defense. It is nice to get the blacksmith upgrades on them. Helps them survive a bit better. They are weak to archers. as most shock infantry are, but they also frighten nearby enemy infantry, so they're good at causing routs to happen. 177 men in the battalion on large unit settings. Their morale is pretty much average, movement speed's average, everything else is kind of normal. Note that they do have a bonus against the wargs and elephants, so I don't know if you'll ever actually fight Harad as Anduin unless you play a very, very late campaign, or you do something weird where you migrate as the Anduin Vale to Harad. That's actually, I might keep that in mind for a future playthrough. But anyway, solid unit, very solid. Just don't let them be your front line. Shock infantry are meant to kind of get behind or get onto key targets, like, say, Uruk bodyguards. These guys are a great counter to them. So do note the Uruk Slayers of Mirkwood are stronger than Beorning Axemen, but Beorning Axemen are at least better than Orc Maulers. So that's a common kind of matchup you might see with Dol Guldur. They'll beat Orc Maulers, but Orc Slayers or Uruk Slayers are a tier just above the Beorning Axemen. But solid infantry. Shared with them are the Beorning Spearmen to give you a very defensive spear unit, 14 attack, or sorry, 14 defense and 4 attack. Again, this is kind of what you'll see with most human nations is a typical 4-14 split for their spearmen. You see this with the Rovanian Godrots. You see this with what's the Balkoth spearmen of Rune. You see this pretty often with most nations. I think even Airling spearmen of Rohan have about that same stat spread. So pretty common there. You know, they share this with a lot of other factions. They do come with shield wall, but aside from that, I mean, they are just, you know, spears. Solid at holding the line, okay at doing damage, great against cavalry. I mean, nothing too fancy about them. I do like the little bear insignia that they have on their shields, the little bear paw. I think that's pretty nice, and I think it's amazing that so many of these men are able to grow out these just massive beards across their whole army. Anyway, that is the Tier 2 Barracks of the Beorning units. Once you upgrade that to Tier 3, you then get the Beorning Defenders, a single-handed axe and shield unit. So they trade armor piercing of the Beorning Axemen for just non-armor piercing, but they do get a +2 attack, and they actually get 10 more defense. So basically combine the Beorning Axemen and the Beorning Spearmen together, improve the defense, improve the attack, but lose the armor piercing, and of course they have about 25 less men per battalion, but a very solid infantry unit. They're around on par with, like, say, Gondor infantry, I would say. I think Gondor infantry have the defensive buff there, but I believe Gondor infantry have lower than 9 attack. I want to say it's 7 off the top of my head. I'll have to double check that, but pretty comparable units there. They do maintain the bonus against wargs. You'll see this a lot in Anduin's roster. They're very much an anti-warg faction across most of their units. In fact, if we check them all so far, that should be skin changers. Definitely the Valesmen, because they're spears. Not the Vale Archers or the Store Sheriffs, but Beorning Spearmen, Beorning Axemen, and the Beorning Defenders. And moving on, next to them, sharing the Tier 2 slot, would be the Beorning Shield Bearers. These guys lose 3 attack, but gain 3 more defense. Again, good against wargs and all sorts of mounted units. Pretty much just a straight upgrade to the Beorning Spearmen. If you can get these guys, get them. They share the shield wall, so they're able to get into a very nice tight formation, and I personally love the shields on these guys. Just these huge freaking shields. I love that. Good morale. This is where the morale starts to get good in the tier, and they have an okay cost, like 835. So great unit to have. And finally, also at Tier 3, you unlock the Bear Warriors. Pretty much the upgrade to the Axemen. These guys are incredibly heavily armored. You can see they have elaborate chainmail, red capes and tabards, and these like feathered helmets, kind of reminiscent of the Great Eagles. Looking at their stats, they go from 7 to 11 attack with an 8 charge and 21 total defense. Do note their battalion size is lower, as that's typically pretty common among elite units. They, instead of causing fear, they actually inspire your troops. So they'll keep the morale pretty heavy. If your general goes down, keep your army near the Bear Warriors, and they will keep your soldiers fighting. Or if you have a far flank away from your general, send them in with the Bear Warriors, and they'll keep those soldiers fighting for a long time. Of course, great against armor, very good morale. They will fight for a long time. And like pretty much all the other Beorning units, they share the bonus against the mounts. So the Beornings, in fact, do the shield, do the defenders have the bonus? They just have the bonus against wargs, but pretty much the entirety of this line is good against wargs, and if not, almost all of them except for the defenders are good against all other types of cavalry, at least being camels and elephants. So pretty good here. They're not so great against horses, but you're going to be fighting wargs and other evil beasts for the most part anyway. They used to be the Carrot Guard, which were an area of like restricted recruitment unit. You could only get them, I think, in Bjorn's Halls and Bethelberg, but now they are available anywhere as long as you build the Beorning Barracks. They also have the nice bear paw shield on their back, though do note that does not give them any defense for their shield. Rather, it probably just, extra armor for them. Anyway, that'll do it for the Beorning tier. Great infantry here. That is pretty much all of your infantry, your best infantry. We will go on to the Woodsman next. We're going to start off with a unit that I used to really not like in version 4.5. The Woodman Warriors, actually, in my personal campaign I was doing as Anduin, kind of became a staple of my campaign. Only 6 attack, 9 defense. They aren't terribly amazing, but they do trade very well up against, like, pretty much anything from Dol Guldur. Snowwork Raiders will, of course, outmatch them. Snowwork Spears will outlast them. But taking them down to the south to fight either the Goblins in the west or Dol Guldur, the Woodman Warriors are very reliable infantry. It's always nice to have a few of them. They do have a 110% movement speed, so they're significantly faster than Orcs, who I think have like a 90 to 95% base, so they're good at kind of flanking or just ambushing. They can hide anywhere, so you can park them somewhere on the side of like the flanks of your formation and then send them into, go in for a side charge. It's pretty solid, and they have a charge of 6, which is pretty nice, so definitely an ambush and assault unit there. Sharing their tier are the Woodman Hunters. Pretty much just an upgrade to the Veil Archers. You get a bit better defense and melee attack, and you do go up +1 missile attack. Primarily, their advantage is their higher accuracy, whereas the Veil Archers are low at 150 meters with 20 arrows. These guys pick up 4 more arrows, 20 more meters of range, and average accuracy. They also share the higher movement speed of the Woodman Warriors at 110%. Great archer to have. I definitely recommend don't sleep on the Woodman Barracks. It's good to have a couple of those to get Woodman Hunters and Woodman Warriors in your early game. Going on to the Tier 3 Woodman Barracks. I can't remember the actual name of it. But you have the Woodman Wardens, pretty much the upgrade to the Woodman Warriors. You throw them 2 more attack, like 5 more defense, and you give them an armor-piercing javelin with 8 missile attack, 55-meter range there. They get 4 of them, so pretty much your only javelin unit. It is nice to have javelins, though, as a faction. Having a very powerful burst damage, armor-piercing, close-range missile. You can do a lot of damage like that. Throw them against, like, Khamul Shadow Knights or Trolls, or, if you see some Uruk Pikes, they are a very good counter against them. Though in melee, they are not effective against armor. They do have swords, but they can hide anywhere, so they share that trait. I believe the Woodman Hunters can too. Yeah, they can hide anywhere, and they share 110% movement speed, which I'm pretty certain is across this whole Woodman tier. So the Woodmans, they can hide anywhere, they have higher movement speed, and typically a high charge bonus. Then we go on to the Woodman Trackers. These guys, pretty much just the upgrade to the Woodman Hunters. They go up 2 more missile attack to 6 with a high accuracy, 10 more meters of range. They pick up 2 more arrows, and they have a bit better defense, so they'll survive better against other counter-skirmishing fire. And 5 melee attack, 11 defense. They'll at least do okay in melee. Obviously, you don't want them to fight anything dedicated. Wargs will do a lot of damage to them. Do note that pretty much this whole line doesn't have a bonus against wargs, except for the Woodman Wardens, but I think that's because of their javelin, not necessarily their melee weapon. That's just the fact that throwing weapons in general are always really strong against them. So those are your Woodman Trackers. And then your final highest tier unit are the Greenwood Foresters, going up to 7 melee attack with a spear. They can put down stakes, so I think they're your only stake unit. The Bear Warriors might do it. No, they don't do it. Just the Greenwood Foresters. Again, hiding anywhere, 110% movement. Because they have spears, they can hold their own against wargs that charge them. 13 defense is solid. The shield also helps them when they're fighting other archers. So these are basically your rangers, 220 meter range, 32 missiles, and very high accuracy. Ideally, you don't want them getting shot, but their advantage against pretty much any other ranger unit is that they do come equipped with a shield. The only other ranger I can think of that has a shield off the top of my head would be the Dolem Roth Rangers, but I think they're more meant to go into melee anyway. I think they might have better defense. I could be misremembering that. But the Greenwood Foresters, very solid ranger unit. It's nice to have these. And then I included them here because it just made sense. The Sylvan March Wardens, 10 melee attack, 8 missile, very high accuracy, more range than the Greenwood Foresters, and more accuracy because if you don't know, the accuracy descriptions are kind of on a racial bonus, so average for an orc is lower than average for a human or dwarf, which is lower than average for an elf. So elven very high accuracy is much better than human very high accuracy. So great units here. They can also hide anywhere 120% movement speed, so your fastest infantry unit. Same defense. They sacrifice the shield though for more defense skills. So against archers, they are arguably a little bit worse. 5 armor against arrows with the 3 shield is 8 defense. These guys only have 7 defense against arrows. But ideally, you keep them out of range of enemy archers using that very high accuracy and their movement speed. So great archer unit here, but again, you can only get these in Dol Guldur, and they are quite expensive, but it's a little bit of flavor, and they are, they fit the roster very well, kind of showing that alliance between the elves and the Anduin. And I didn't talk about mercenaries at all, but you can get Sylvan Axemen as the Anduin Vale if you go into the forest, so you can get, 2 different Woodland Realm type elven units. And for the dwarves, you can get Dwarven Travelers and the Sons of the Fallen. So you can have a mixed alliance of men and elves and dwarves if you play as the Anduin. Now we will go into the last tier. This will be the Horsemen. If you build the Eotheod Barracks, at first you only get the Eotheod Horsemen, but these guys are kind of a specialist cavalry. They fill a very nice role in your roster. They are mounted skirmishers with 7 missile attack that is good against armor. Solid accuracy, 65 range, and then in melee they have a long spear and a shield, so 9 total defense, 3 split across the board, 6 attack. I don't believe they're effective against horses and camels, so they're actually good against other mounts. Keep them away from wargs in melee if you can help it. Ideally, you would just skirmish against the wargs with this unit, but they're nice to have, they're readily available, and having cavalry is always very useful in medieval too, just because cavalry is ridiculous in this Total War game. Once you do upgrade and get the blacksmith and the Lord's Hall, you do unlock the upgrades, the Eotheod Cavalry. You lose the missiles, but you get a better lance unit, or at least a long spear. I guess this is kind of a crude lance. 11 charge with 7 attack and a secondary attack of 6, so after they charge, they will switch to their, I believe they have a hand axe. Either a hand axe or it's a sword. I can't exactly remember. It looks like it's a sword. So they have swords in melee. They don't have a bonus against the cavalry though, so do keep in mind, like, the cavalry of Anduin isn't really necessarily meant to fight other cavalry. It can do the job, but it doesn't really excel at that. But the high charge bonus and high defense Eotheod Cavalry, very useful. Going to the Eotheod Archers, high missile attack, or high accuracy, 130 range, 34 missiles, 6, 6, and 6 for their attacks and charge bonuses, 13 defense. They don't have a shield, but they can do the shooting circle, so they can be effective at fighting other archers. And of course, they're very mobile. And honestly, 6 charge for a horse archer is actually really, really good. I think very few horse archers have that type of a charge bonus, so they're good at the charge. And lastly, your bonus unit, your heavy cavalry, are the Framsguard. Barded horses with chainmail covering them, chainmail mounted men. They kind of look like the Rohirrim in a way. In fact, I mean, the Eotheod are the ancestors of the Rohirrim, and in Divide and Conquer, it's implied that these are the remnants of the Eotheod that stayed and continued to grow and develop for hundreds of years. 11 attack. They are not effective against armor. 8 charge, 21 total defense. Most of that being armor, so keep them away from halberds and axemen that'll charge at them. They do lose a bit of movement speed. They go down to 95%, so they're a bit slower, but they are heavy cavalry. They do have a bonus against other mounts, so these guys are meant to go toe-to-toe with other cavalry, and they inspire other troops. So kind of like the bear warriors, you can keep them around your army, and they will do it very well at keeping up your forces and keeping them in the fight. So that pretty much does it for the Anduin roster. So next week we will go into the realm of Angmar, and typically what Galadathan used to do is he would show their faction, but I decided I would just bring up the Orcs of Gundabad, as that's one of the primary enemies you'll be fighting as the Anduin. Of course, they do have a very tough campaign, but once you deal with one of your enemies, either in the north or south, it becomes a lot more bearable. And then once if you've taken Gundabad out, and then you just go, you pretty much have one direction to go. You can go south, and the Anduin does have a very strong economy. So the apiaries, they can make a lot of money. They make a lot of trade around the Anduin Vale. So it's a hard faction in the early game, but they can definitely snowball and become quite the powerhouse, especially looking at the stats of the late game units. You've pretty much got all bases covered. You don't have any halberds, so that's a weakness of the faction. You don't have any armor-piercing spears. Your spears are pretty much limited to the Beorning roster, and the fact that you do have a split barracks can make it kind of difficult to keep up with like the sheer numbers that other factions might be able to pump out. Like other factions, like a fully developed Gondorian city is able to train their cavalry, their archers, their high-tier infantry, their militia. You are kind of limited on that end with Anduin, but your units make up for it with their specialist power. But anyway, that'll pretty much do it for the Anduin overview. Next week we will have the Angmar overview, and then so on and so forth. Again, guys, if you made it this far, I would appreciate it if you wouldn't mind clicking on the GoFundMe link down below, or you don't have to, but it does help me out a lot. And until the next one, my friends, farewell.